Hello, everyone. Welcome to the series of interviews with me, Iva Tasheva, founder of Cyen. And today we are not going to do interview. We are going to present to you our new paper written together with the Uplift and Clémence Betesuku, who is the founder, is sitting here with me. So you hear from two founders, two women based in Brussels, Belgium, and France, discussing and finding the commonalities and leveraging ESG, environmental, social, and governance aspect, and cybersecurity for resilient organizations. Thank you, Clémence, for working with us on this and for agreeing to present it to our audience personally.
Hi everyone. Hi Eva. Thank you for having me today and very excited to have this discussion about how cybersecurity and ESG intersect.
When we wrote the paper, we started with a simple discussion. We met at an event in Paris, if I'm not wrong, Clemens. And we said, okay, you work in cybersecurity. We all hear about cybersecurity, the impact of incidents every day. And there's plenty of examples to show of how cybersecurity impacts our economy, our society, and our environment. At least we experts see how this could happen. Luckily, we haven't seen it yet. But it was more difficult for me as cybersecurity expert to see the opposite, how ESG is impacting cybersecurity. And this at least was my immediate research, let's say, interest to identify, okay, how can we work together in two very important areas that overlap in terms of it's the same organizations that need to take care. So it's usually businesses that have operations, something to preserve, but they also have impact on the rest of us. We are all working in Europe, so we thought there is a large volume and updates of the European legislation in both areas. And we see how, particularly, saw the same trends of large, mature organizations having very advanced focus and understanding of both topics, but at the same time, SMEs, small companies, struggling to even grasp the idea impact of any of those topics, let alone leveraging or taking advantage of it. So this was kind of the trigger of us sitting together and asking ourselves a number of questions. So we do this in cybersecurity. How do you do it in ESG? How does it look like? And our objective was eventually to help these organizations, which are not there yet, understand what is there for them, what are the basic principles, evolution in both areas, and ideally also how to leverage both. What was your key interest, Clemens, when we started? Why you thought, okay, I work in ESG, but I recognize cybersecurity has an impact?
I think first of all it was when you look at the way things are done, you look at cybersecurity and you look at ESG, you don't automatically see the link between the two. But it was in my mind at first I didn't know a lot about cybersecurity, and to me cybersecurity was mostly what you see on TV, right? Basically it was just maybe cyber attacks and just it, but seeing the link was not so obvious. And then we had this discussion. It was basically, what are you doing? What am I doing? Yes, I'm doing kind of compliance. I have this compliance background. And you say, yeah, but actually what I'm doing is also actually quite the same, just on the cybersecurity aspect. So I was like, okay, that's very interesting. And I think we could kind of learn a lot from each other. And especially when you see companies, the way they're working today, the way they're functioning, you have it can be SMEs or even bigger companies. They have sustainability services and they have cybersecurity services, and these services barely interact. And the more we made the research, because I don't know if you remember, but at first, like it was supposed to be like a small article. Actually, like when we started the conversation, it was supposed to be a small article to explain cybersecurity is this, sustainability is this, and like the more we went in, sorry, it ended up being like a white paper, like kind of like 15-ish pages. So to me, it was very interesting to see how these two topics are like very kind of like intersect, and we don't really realize it, especially when people think about sustainability, they mostly think about like the environment aspect, but you also have like the governance aspect and also kind of like the social aspect. And like you take cybersecurity, especially when you mention like incidents, like when you think about like all the incident reports you have to do, all of this reporting, actually it go into like the governance aspect of cybersecurity. So the main question was like kind of like a discovery. It's like we've been working on like parallel line, but actually we're kind of like we can meet at some point. So that's why it was like very interesting to do like a deep research on this topic. So that's how it came to be.
Mm. Indeed, what I've learned a lot from you, Clémence, and we explain also in the paper, is the multitude of regulations, of requirements that are now in the ESG field. But we also identified that there is, as you said, a lot of alignment in terms of objectives. So it's all about governance, it's about the people and processes. It is a lot about due diligence of the supply chain, and in cybersecurity, every day we are now reminded that supply chain cybersecurity is the thing. We cannot be secure unless who we work with is secure. Airport hacks recently in Europe, but also all the most of the hospital hacks happen through supply chain. We had a major automotive manufacturer in the UK also recently stopping operation for weeks in a row, still recovering from a supply chain attack, which was simple ransomware over employee credentials. So we see how these little gaps here and there, they all bring impact on both the government's governance, but also on the economics, on people. There are people involved. There are companies that are going out bankrupt for lack of security, and this is kind of again aligned. We have to identify those risks. We have to manage it. We have to know what we are getting into. Another kind of similarity. And something interesting that I also was surprised to discover is when we started discussing reporting.
Yes.
Because indeed, for security, it's obvious. We report incidents, and where now we start reporting vulnerabilities as well as obligation under CRA, for instance, Cyber Resilience Act. But we have seen in the in DORA, Digital Operation Resilience Act, for financial sector, there is also a lot of reporting of critical suppliers, and you have very similar focus, right? In ESG, it's a lot about reporting. So first identifying, then centralizing, and then being accountable for your supply chain. How does that stay on the ESG side?
Yes, indeed, as you said, like you have a lot of disclosure required for like on the ESG side, and like it didn't used to be the case, so it's very recent. It's like the European Union has launched all this new regulation so that we can have kind of like a standardized disclosure among companies, because the thing it was like before the regulation, it was very kind of like dismantled, so everybody has its own conception of what was sustainable, not sustainable within its company. But like when you don't have, and I think it's the same in cybersecurity, the same rationale, when you don't have like a standardized way, it kind of like creates kind of like, I wouldn't say a mess, but like a lack of trust. And like if you want people to trust you, you want organizations to trust you need to have like a standardized way. So that's why the European Union has launched all this regulation, especially a big one called like the Corporate Sustainable Disclosure Regulation, where companies have to like, it's mostly like bigger companies, they have to once a year to disclose in the report some like environmental, social, and governance considerations. And like the very interesting thing about this disclosure is like in one of the requirements, the companies have to disclose like some disclosure related to cybersecurity. And like companies might think, oh, it's kind of like double the work, but actually it's not, because they can take some disclosures they had like from the cybersecurity, like everything related to GDPR, and just take the information from GDPR and have it in the report. So it's not like a double the work. It's like if it's like really organized, you just have to extract the info you already have and have it in your CSDR compliant report. Basically, that's how it works.
Mhm. It is very important, and this was also our focus, is to identify how to leverage this so that we identify that we individually work in our own respective worlds with our own respective groups and stakeholders and knowledge, but we don't seem to often interact. And what you say, you do have already the information, you report it in one or another way on cybersecurity. It's important to use the same information not only for simplicity, but also to avoid conflicts. It
Yeah,
is easy to, you would always need to compare notes, make sure you don't give different messages,
different information.
different regulations.
Right.
This is something, yeah, that every organization should take care. On the other hand, we also had very interesting discussions while writing the paper on them. Okay, both the regulation ask for disclosure, but in the cybersecurity community, we're much more cautious against disclosure. For instance, when we disclose vulnerabilities, they're usually with limited information of the pathway of exploitation. We do disclose them once the vulnerability is mitigated, so there is mitigation measure. And even now with regulatory requirements for reporting this more in detail to regulators, there are terms of engagement to at what point a regulator can make it public. So it's not something we feel, okay, reporting is good, but also overly reporting is a risk.
Yeah.
You expose yourself to further cybersecurity attacks. And this is what we had a very interesting discussion. Probably we should also be careful with the ESG and see all the sustainability reporting to make sure that by reporting information on suppliers, on supply chain and so on, we don't open basically the organization for further attacks. So this is another area we were not able to give a specific formula of how to, but a consideration to give to every organization to make sure they do the right thing, right?
Yes, correct. I don't have like the exact clause for me, but like if I remember correctly, when I was reading the paper on all this disclosure and like the potential conflict of interest, if you have like information that can be like very sensitive, the regulation allows you to not disclose this information. So you just have like in your sustainability report, you have to insert a note saying, for this part, I will not disclose this information because it's like sensitive. If I'm that's
Indeed.
the exact wording of the European regulators.
Indeed, yes. So again, important to know what is creating the risk. Sensitive information for one, let's say, group of stakeholders might not appear sensitive, but it could be sensitive from the
For everyone, yeah.
cybersecurity perspective. So again, compare notes and be aware of what you are communicating to the outside world. Something else probably that we came also to the understanding that is all about the processes, right? We say, okay, there is no magic formula, but there are checkpoints and processes to make sure that you improve both your cybersecurity and ESG. And at least from my proposal was, and it seemed acceptable for ESGs to go around the famous Plan, Do, Check, Act area. And what we have added a few years back is share. Again, important element of communication to the community, to the shareholders, regulators, and users. And it seems that we are both following this cycle. Basically, it's planning your measures, implementing them, checking. Of course, it's a lot of you call it reporting, but this is internal check as well. How far have we gone? Have we identified any deviations from the standard objectives? And then acting on deviations, of course, and sharing is important part in terms of bringing everyone on board on this. Yeah.
Yes, correct. It's totally the same. I think sometimes the wording might be different because it's like different industries with different like with specific vocabulary. But like when you look in practice, what people have to do, it's always like the same principle as what you as the PDCA. It's always about like planning. It's like all the risk management, and then also about doing checking because like audit is really important to see where you come from, what can be mitigated, what can be improved, and where you are going, basically. And then always acting and like it's just like iteration, you work and you see what can be improved during like the work process.
Mhm. We also identify that we are looking at the same things. It's just different lenses that we
That's
put.
it, correct.
We look at the same thing. We look at the people. So how are they feeling? How are they working towards or against our objective? We look at technology, the impact of technology mostly. Technology is not an objective of its own, but it works
No.
there to serve some objective, and what are the side effects of this technology for security or for ESG. We also look at processes. We discussed this extensively now with the PDCA. So indeed, we act in the same places. We look the same with the same focus. We put different lenses, and it comes from different communities. And this was also the objective, to help these communities understand better the other lenses, to have more complete view of the situation. What I wanted also to share is that for me personally, also one of the triggers to look into it was the big discussion of the impact of technology, right? The technology on environment, the energy intensity of AI models. I have personally been interested in research around the impact of encryption. We all know it's a great measure for securing the confidentiality of data, and seems that regulators now are putting it everywhere. Everything should be encrypted. Uh, in transit, in storage, but also we know that there is impact of every measure, and specifically this impact is mostly notable when we discuss the new technologies like AI that consume, of course, a lot of power, but also we see it on our screen, like ChatGPT, for instance, and it looks like a simple tool solution that we can play with, but there are big data centers, chips, and GPU behind to make this simple request running. And using it for cybersecurity might be a justifiable reason, but still we need to be aware of the cost. So cybersecurity is not just the consultant, it's not just the cool new tool you buy, but it's also what it would cost you in terms of energy consumption, in terms of technology to run your IT behind. I don't know if you have insights on the environmental impact when we speak about energy and other resource intensity. How does the ESG look into that? What's the objectives?
Yeah, I think actually it's like currently a big debate in like the ESG community because I think because when people think about sustainability, like first thing they think is like environment, but people are also like they don't see the link with the technology, but what people need to understand is like if you want ESG to be really taken seriously, you need kind of like accurate data. Like you need like very accurate data. And today, if you want fast data and accurate data, you use AI. Basically, today people like companies are going to use AI for their reports, drafting the report, for instance. Most of them like are going to use AI. That's why today you see a lot of like data providers developing around AI because they're like basically like the proposal is like you have to make a report. We're doing this with like AI or like all the industries around it. And I think that's the first point we should be careful about. But like the second point is like very similar beyond kind of like beyond ChatGPT and using it for the report or beyond like the data provider is like also about all this energy cost because it's like huge like power hungry energy when you use all of this with like the data centers. So you have now uh, a new school emerging. It's like saying you need to develop a sustainable AI in the community. That's why that's what you do have today. And like some people are giving examples. So you have like I would say you have two layers. So the first layer is like at the company level. When you're looking for a data provider, you have to look behind how is using it, like or how like AI is being used, how the technology is being used. This is at like the company level. And then you have like the higher level. I wouldn't call it like policy, but it's just like between companies and between policies. It's basically now all these kind of like data centers developing. It's also about seeing the practices basically. And some, for instance, we're giving example to develop a label around it. Or for instance, there was this example, I was at this conference the day before yesterday, and this guy was suggesting, for instance, like for manufacturers using AI, maybe integrating circular economy principles. For those who don't know, circular economy is basically about kind of like reusing and not producing new things. So you have a lot of debate, and I think it's only the beginning because people are like, you cannot be sustainable and using AI. Some people are saying you cannot you cannot live without AI today. You have to live with it anyway. So you have to find a way to make it sustainable. So that's a big debate these days.
Mhm. Indeed, we have to find a way to make it sustainable, but we also have to find a way to use it. This is
Yeah.
discussions I would have with colleagues. Is we're only now figuring out what is it useful mostly for.
Mm.
There was this famous joke, I want AI to be doing my laundry and washing and not my art, right?
Exactly.
What tasks we want people,
Yeah.
intelligence and energy, and what tasks is worth to put on AI. This is something that we are only now discovering and would be a very good question mark for each organization when they onboard on any new hype or technology is to consider both aspects of security and ESG when they make decisions of the employment of new technologies. Not for anything, but it's they both as organization you would say, okay, I'm not a charity organization.
Yeah.
I'm that big, I wouldn't change the world, right?
Yeah.
But each of us is big enough to care about our bills and about our sustainable business model. Can this continue to exist? In cybersecurity, it's very difficult to continue to exist without security,
Yes.
but everyone now is under attack, especially if they're working with important critical infrastructure. They would be the first one to, uh, let's say, the chips are higher now,
Yeah.
hack everyone. But also on the ESG side, we realize that it is not for the common good. It does
Yeah.
have impact on your pocket. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
someone is paying the price eventually for these resources.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something else I wanted to mention, okay, we said the energy intensity of AI. I was also interested in the battery consumption of encryption. So we mentioned that it is expensive and it does also kind of speed up the life cycle of battery, another resource that is not to underestimate. We cannot just continue to trash and produce. Circularity might be an interesting case there to figure out. But there's also so much development in the cryptography side that it's very difficult now to capture all of it and have cautious decisions, but one can always try their
Right.
best.
Exactly. Yes. I think it's like now it's still like a new topic. As you said, like we just like recently learned how to use it. Now it's really about identifying what we should use it for and like do we need to use it for everything? Maybe not. And like really identifying the main point where we should like use it. It's because it's like a power hungry energy. So it's like all about like finding the right balance.
Mhm. On the positive side, or maybe not so positive, but the regulators didn't yet come to this say level of maturity because ESG or environment is and social for that matter is very little
Yeah.
considered within the cybersecurity requirements. We do it for security and security only, and everything is justified. So we go directly to the security side. But I imagine, and it will be a maturity increase to also be able to measure this. We call it adequate measures. Well, what is adequacy? Is it just linked to the cybersecurity risk, or does it also consider the cost basically in resource, in societal environmental cost of the relevant security measure? That could also be probably something to look into in the future and consider more as we grow in maturity and grasp these topics better.
Yes, agree.
Something else I wanted to mention is that in the beginning I opened with the impact of society, most visible obviously on the hospital hacks, how patients are deprived from a care. We have seen, I tried to research it, and there is no, let's say, very reliable source of conclusion, but we know for sure in Europe we have had at least two victims of cyber attacks. One in Germany a few years back, hospital attacked by with ransomware, and it was actually university hospital, so it was not even a target. It so happened that they were on the same network as the university itself, which led to delaying care of a critical situation patient, which then lost their life. And more recently, in 2025, also in the UK, linked to again ransomware, economic impact, so someone hacking an entity to ask for money to release the system. This also led to delaying care of critically ill patient that unfortunately lost their life. So we now see how we're really losing life in cybersecurity. But what is very, very scary is the possibility for scaling that up, right? So in a way, those were people with risk already that delay was critical for them, but we are now seeing attacks on critical infrastructure, for instance, transport. This could really have devastating attacks on a group of people, well-being and health. We see medical devices more and more connected. They can act on people's health. We've seen, for instance, it's linked to the environment, but also environment is also for human being is the colonial pipeline, which was linked to the energy grid, which didn't result in environmental disaster, but could have very well been. And we see agencies triggering the alert in the US, specifically in the water systems, due to the lacking security measures and high impact of potential malicious actions through IT systems. So this is not to scare people, but to be aware that we haven't seen it yet. That doesn't mean we are immune. It only means that in this sequence of situations, we were not either the target or it didn't happen yet for one or another reason, but we need to do more to prevent it from happening in the future. So it's a little bit like COVID when we knew a pandemic is coming. One day it was in this Discovery movies, Discovery Channel movies, but in fact, it really did hit us and we were not prepared. So we could have done better to prepare to avoid it or to know how to act. And this is the call to action in the environmental field as well. In Europe, we try, but from very delicately and from far. We call it the NIS2 directive, which aims at, in the past was called critical infrastructure, now is essential entities like the water, the transport, the hospitals, the manufacturing, all these that we mention now as very important for society and for the environment. But it aims at, it's coming slow, obviously. Regulation doesn't come overnight with objectives of pretty much standard requirements for information security management, of some specific security requirements very much focused on the risk management. So here again, we interlink with the ESG consideration, the governance, the risk management liability. And then, of course, happening not as a revolution, but more as an evolution, which my call to action to companies would be to get inspired by it. Of course, if you are in the scope, it's at the absolute minimum. You have to implement those measures, but don't take this as a universal truth. It is not state-of-art security directive, it is minimum security measures. So try to figure out where do we go next. So this is not the end point, the end journey. This is just the beginning of the journey for cybersecurity in an organization. Yes, what else can we share? Probably we can share a little bit of the case studies because we thought everything we discuss, it's very good. It comes from experts, but it's very theoretical to companies. So we really wanted to bring the case on the ground and to help companies see this situation where those links are most important to make and leverage. Would you like maybe Clémence to present the three scenarios that we envisaged, we described, and we guided companies through?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, what case study we had is was like an IT company based in the UK, and let's say it was like really about the supply chain. This IT company is an SME, but it happened that this company wants to work with a large corporation. And the thing is, like a large corporation, they do have requirement on the cybersecurity side and also on the ESG side. So if you are an SME that wants to work with larger company, I don't know, it can be, for instance, let's say L'Oreal, for instance, into like beauty, you want to work with this company, you will have, because L'Oreal is under like European ESG regulation, but also under European cybersecurity regulation, you will have to be compliant with this regulation in order to work with this company, gain a contract. Otherwise, you will be like eliminated, so it won't be possible for you to work with them. So like we had like first thing we would advise to a company to do in this case, like let's say the company doesn't have any cybersecurity measure in place or like any ESG measures in place. First thing we would do as a first step is really about just like framing the strategy and really about like seeing what you currently have and don't have, because sometimes you think you don't have anything on maybe cybersecurity on like on ESG, but it's just because you haven't written it down. Basically, sometimes that's it. Like sometimes we speak with companies and like correct me if I'm wrong, Eva, and then we say I didn't do anything in like related to ESG or I didn't do anything related to cybersecurity. But like when we perform an audit, yes, some stuff are missing, but actually some stuff are already there. It's just that people are not aware. And like it's like we were saying previously, Eva, it's all about like the people and process, like the education and the awareness. So that would be like first, like the first step, really about like framing the strategy and like making a sustainability plan tailored to the companies and also identifying all like the applicable requirement, whether it be on the cybersecurity side or whether it be on the ESG side. If I have to go on the ESG side, you won't have like the regulation applicable because you're as an SME, logically speaking, you will be under the threshold. So you won't have like the CSDR, sorry, applicable, but you will have voluntary regulation applicable. So this is the regulation you will have to watch out. Basically, it's called like VSME, so it's like voluntary sustainability standards, and like it's kind of like a low level CSDR. It's like the same principle but adapted to SMEs because when the regulator made it, like it was really aware that as an SME, you don't have the same budget, the same allocation as a company as L'Oréal or maybe Thales, like the bigger companies. So this was really about this, checking like on the ESG side and also checking on like the cybersecurity side with the requirement assessment. And then you would have like everything related to implementation to do. So it's like the main advice I would give. It's really about having this collaboration. So if you have like an ESG person and like cybersecurity person, don't have them working separately. Have them working hand in hand because like as we explained earlier, some reporting from GDPR can be included in the reporting for the VSME or like for the report on the sustainability side. So that was kind of like the first scenario, really like kind of like regulation compliance. And the second scenario is like, let's say you are a company and like you want to raise funds. Basically, you have two scenarios. The first one coming from the financial industry would be you can raise funds, but it's not the easiest part. And like if you're based in the European Union, you have a second option if you want to get money. It's like the grant aspect, basically. But like in the grant aspect, it's the same. Today, the European Union is really about cybersecurity and also ESG. So you won't be able to run away from it. So basically, you will have to prove when asking for the grant that you have a cybersecurity system in place, sustainability system in place, risk management, and everything related to it. Otherwise, you won't be able to get the grant. I try to make it very short, but really to show the importance, like whatever the road you're taking to get new contract working with bigger companies, or just you want to get European grants, you cannot run away from cybersecurity and ESG. So and it's always like the minimum to do. But like if you feel you can do better, just try to do better. And it's really also in every day, it's like also a competitive advantage.
Indeed, and how we look at the scenarios is in terms of proactiveness versus reactiveness. As you say, you cannot run away from it, but how you're going to face it would have different consequences for you as organization, cost, stress, or opportunity wise. So we thought if you are proactive about it, you would be able to manage your own destiny. You would know what you're getting into, you would know how to integrate it in your processes, you or your technology. Maybe you're now developing a solution. We all know security and ESG is not an afterthought. It could be, but it's expensive and it might be very damaging to your solution. So, security by design is a principle we very much strongly believe in to be able to have flawless security, not as a cost and a burden to your excellent solution. And then, last but not least, it's about time, right? Everything is, we don't have all the time in the world to build a company, to strike a deal. There's always deadlines, timelines, and
Yes.
let's say financial flows that are finishing to certain date. They call it run now. Yeah, how long can you survive without contracts or without funding? So being proactive is something that could help you shorten the time to business, shorten the time to deal and funding. Well, we didn't say it all. We really stayed at a high level, but download the article, the white paper, because you would see a lot of statistics. We try to base ourselves on a lot of details of how the different elements interlink, so that you can have really more practical um, tips of where to look at. But what we can already share as a conclusion is that cybersecurity and ESG intersect. We don't say they're the same thing, we say they intersect, and cybersecurity is clearly falling within all the three pillars of the ESG, with good governance, social, and environmental impact. It does require good governance, but also lacking cybersecurity could pose societal risks and trigger environmental crises. Each of the objectives for ESG and cybersecurity could provide a competitive advantage to organizations if they're proactive or aware of it. They're both based on same common objectives and similar regulatory mechanisms. So trying to fight it, divide and conquer in this sense won't be the best strategy, but leverage could actually help, as well as avoid any risks while unlocking business opportunity should be, let's say, it could be achieved by being smart about these important topics. What you can do now is maybe follow our call to action.
Yes. Yes, be proactive on it. And like, if I might add like one last thing is like really about like cybersecurity. It's not random if today cybersecurity is into like sustainability disclosure. It really is a sign that cybersecurity is a global and a social issue. It really is into it. It's I think even like at the company level, as you said, like during the introduction, it can lead companies to bankruptcy, but it can also, there's also effect on like everyday people as us. Like if like in a hospital, you can have like your data compromised, for instance. So you have like many layers of the consequences of cybersecurity from a sustainability impact. So that's why it really does intersect. So really like the call to action is really to be proactive about it and like really to work to work hand in hand. Basically, that's it, and really work on it. And it should be okay, I hope.
Indeed, and if we were to address now the policymakers, which to a certain extent impact the development or at least dictate what is the minimum expected behavior, it is also not a bad idea to leverage and facilitate the uptake of both cybersecurity and ESG objectives by synchronizing the governance requirements. It would be great if there are more common or central reporting platform to avoid duplication. Indeed, maybe it's the same information, but we're reporting to different places. Consider also cybersecurity and ESG requirements, as well as ESG in cybersecurity rules, to have this a smart policy making. And if you, of course, download the paper, read it. If you have any comments, you also have our contact details there. We'll be happy to hear any feedback, be it positive, of course, we'll be very happy to. But if you also have questions, input, we will be happy to consider it for the revision of this paper, so that it is a living document which accompany companies as we grow all in maturity in both areas.